Hey gamers, Kyle here once again, Game Time with Kyle. Hope everyone's doing well. On today's episode, it's time for another system overview. I know we've done a few on this channel in the past. I'll leave a link in the description to a couple good videos, kind of like the Sega Master System and the Atari 7800 for an example. Today we're going to be taking a look at another Sega system here. This is one that is very overlooked and we don't get a chance to talk about. I myself have not had this a very, very long time, but just long enough to really appreciate this system. I think it is kind of overlooked. Is it a great system overall? It's questionable. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. We'll talk about the history a little bit, but it is the Sega Saturn. Sega's third console, I guess you could say, because Master System, Genesis, and then the Sega Saturn. So what we'll do on this video, we'll take a tour around the system, see how it looks, all the plugins and stuff, take a look at the controllers that came with it. There's a couple different styles of controllers. And then we'll end the video by playing probably about 2 games, just a couple minutes of each. I thought we'd dive into a game a lot of people are familiar with on the Saturn, probably its most commonly known game, Nights into Dreams. And then probably another common game I think a lot of gamers are familiar with, but maybe not so much on the Sega Saturn, and that is, we'll take a look at how the original Tomb Raider works on the original Sega Saturn here. So these are kind of the normal cases that a majority of Saturn games came in. So I just kind of I have a weird CD jewel case for Nights. So yeah, that will be next on Game Time. Alright, back at it. My apologies, I know I said I wouldn't do these system overviews with myself holding the camera phone or anything, but it's kind of a weird time of day, so lighting's kind of a little weird. I figured I'm just going to do this really quickly, we'll get it over with, and at least right now I'm looking through the phone and it doesn't look terribly bad, so we'll go with this. My apologies if I shake a little bit. First and foremost, I gotta give a double shout out. I haven't done this in any videos recently, to my buddies J-Rock the Game Rocker. He does kind of this weekly vlog. It's really interesting. Talks about video games and kind of what's been going on in his life. He's a great collector and just overall cool guy. Link in the description for him, J-Rock the Game Rocker, as well as Retro Nonsense. They're a family that talk about a lot of their video game experiences and whatnot. Duke's the dad. He has 3 great kids. I believe, just off the top of my head, 8-Bit Bob, Game Boy, and Anime. His wife, Mother Brain, they have just a really great show. It's awesome. And Duke's just a super nice guy. So I got to give them a shout out as well. Retro Nonsense. Both of those channels will be links in the description as well as some of my other past system overviews if anyone's interested. So, on with the Sega Saturn. Here's the system itself. You see right here, we got the power button. There's the eject or open button. This one's a little sticky. I kind of had to press it a little bit, and even then it doesn't open quite as well. But it does work. There's the reset button. Here's where the disc will go themselves. Let's see if I can get that open. Yeah, it takes a little bit on this system. It's pretty sticky. So there's where your disc would go. I'm not quite sure what this is. This always says cartridge input, but I'm not quite sure if they ever did anything with that because the Saturn was pretty short-lived. On front we got the Sega logo as well as 2 controller ports. Nothing too much on the side. It's pretty. They're pretty smooth sides. On the back is where all of our hookups will go and everything. So there's where connections will go to the TV. AV out right there. Connector. And ACM. This right here is kind of like another mystery thing. Kind of possible expansion ports. Again, I'm not quite sure if they ever did anything with that. Here's where the battery goes for the system itself. Kind of a little bit of a hard drive there. So I'll put that back on. Serial numbers, some vents on the back. And there we go. That's kind of the tour of the Sega Saturn. This one's a little dusty. I haven't played it for a little while, so it should be interesting to play those games next. Just here's the connector that I have. It's an AV out with those cables. There's the AC adapter, just kind of came like that, so nothing, pretty much like it would have been on the PS1 and whatnot. controllers for them. I have two that this one came with. I got this, I think it was off eBay or Amazon. Here's kind of the official one. I got the Sega logo, but this one doesn't really work too well. I don't think it works at all. That's why I got this third party one's the Super 8 pad. This one I really like. All the buttons are just perfect, and it feels great in hand. If you need a third-party controller for your Saturn, I do recommend this brand. It's been a lot of fun. I'm not sure what this one had some sticky buttons, so that's why I kind of got that Super 8 pad as well. I'm not sure. I tried to clean it off a little bit, but it just didn't quite live up to expectations. So you can see how they're modeled. It's a great looking controller. So yeah, Sega Saturn came out in '94. It was kind of a surprise announcement at E3. I'm sure a lot of us know the story. There's Wikipedia if you need to know a lot more. But basically it came out before a lot of people expected it to be out. And a lot of games just weren't ready to go. I think it only launched with 6 games because a lot of game developers who were making games for the Saturn weren't ready to release their games just yet. And they wouldn't be ready until later that year. So it stumbled very quickly out of the gate. And once the original PlayStation came out not too long later, all eyes were on that. N64 was right around the corner as well, so it was just bad timing. I see Sega wanted to surprise everyone and release it a lot sooner than they originally thought. And on paper it sounded good, but like no one was ready. Retailers were not ready to promote it. They didn't do a good job at promoting it. Some stores like Best Buy and KB Toys, back when they were a thing, they didn't want to sell the thing at all. So, which is kind of disappointing because it is kind of a fun little system. But at that point, Sega, after releasing the Genesis, they did the Genesis 32X and then the Sega CD and then the Saturn, all just kind of within a couple years of each other. It was kind of a little bit ridiculous. They wanted to keep it going. But this was an actual new system. But I think by this point, a lot of people are really looking forward to the N64 and PlayStation and whatnot. So just didn't do overly well. I believe it sold about 10 million units worldwide, which is, it wasn't very great. A lot of those were in a lot of those were in Japan, where the Saturn actually did do pretty decent. Sega Saturn in Japan is definitely a console to get. They had a lot more great games for the Saturn as well. It was a lot more of a bigger deal over there. And for those big collectors out there who enjoy collecting consoles and video games, I would probably recommend the Japanese Saturn a little bit more. It was a lot more popular in Japan, and a lot of great games were released for the Japanese version of the Saturn, which I think over there was kind of a white console called the V Saturn or something like that. But yeah, if you're looking to get a lot more into the Saturn, I would probably almost go with the Japanese Saturn myself. I know I'm going to pick that up when I get the chance, because I think there's a lot more fun and better games to play on the Japanese version of the Saturn. Alright, here we go with some Nights into Dreams for the Sega Saturn, being played on the original Sega Saturn, not that emulator crap. So here we go. I can press the start button. Let's play the first stage, kind of show off a little bit. We'll see what you can do right here. New game. That looks good to me. Alright. Be Elliot, I guess, because he has blue hair. I think one of the factors as well as to why the Saturn just didn't really do overly great was because there was no real Sonic game. If you remember, there was no 2D or 3D Sonic game for it. Whereas the Genesis had, 3 Sonic games. It had Sonic and Knuckles. Saturn did have Sonic 3D Blast, I believe, but that wasn't very, very great. So here in the object table, we're just kind of wandering around. We'll eventually get to here, where we play as knights, and away we go. Flying through rings. I have not played this in a long time, so bear with me just for a brief moment here. Destroy those. A very scenic game too. I just love exploring. Oh, I didn't mean to do that, but you can definitely tell just overall it's just a very Sega looking game with the characters and its colors and everything. rings there. Flying through rings, but much better than a Superman 64. Put some stars here. I'm really glad Sega did turn it around a little bit more with the Sega Dreamcast that was released a couple years later. That's a much beloved system. I think a lot more people had that. The Dreamcast is just a great system overall. We'll definitely see that on the near future for a system review. But you kind of get the idea here. I think I might be doing something a little bit wrong. So I know I'm not going as fast as I should. My time limit's just about done, so I'm just going to breeze through this. But yeah, this kind of Nights into Dreams, of course, you kind of get the idea. Later stages get a lot more challenging and a lot more scenic as well. So we ran out of time, we turned back into the normal human kid. Now we have to get to top of the mountain again, where we can get Knights. So yeah, that's just the basic idea. I know it doesn't look overly like much, but it definitely was one of the best selling and most beloved games for the Saturn. So we had to show it off here. Something I want to show off as well here before we dive into Tomb Raider is just the main menu of the Saturn. I don't know how many people may have or may not have seen it, but mostly used, you can play your CDs, kind of like you could with the PlayStation 1 and Dreamcast. You can play your CDs. System settings right here, you can kind of take a look at what that has to offer. Exit, all of our CD controls. Advanced controls, program sequence, adjust vocals, shuffle tracks, adjust surround sound. So kind of a fun little system here. So let's put Tomb Raider in. It's reading the disc there. Start app. You see at the top of the screen there was, oh it's too late now, but there were adjust tracks. You could, it looks like you could almost listen to the soundtrack, use this as a CD, and whatever music's in the game, play it. So in the interest of time, we won't actually do too much of Tomb Raider here, just for keeping this video a little more brief, but we'll at least show off how it plays out and looks mainly on the Sega Saturn, because when you think Tomb Raider, especially the original one, I think a lot more people think of the PlayStation 1 version. So let's dive in here real quick. We won't do a whole lot with this. It's really weird holding a Saturn controller for Tomb Raider. Yeah, we'll just do the gym here. We won't even play a stage. There's Lara Croft. Load times are a little bit more, it seems like a bit longer than they are on the PS1.
Welcome to my home. I'll take you off. Use the D-pad to go into the music room.
So there's our Lara Croft. Yeah, everything's a lot more, I want to say lower resolution, a little more rougher around the edges than they appear on the PS1. The PlayStation version actually, for its time, is a pretty decent looking game. This one's, like I said, just a little rough. Using the D-pad's kind of weird for these old Tomb Raiders.
Okay, let's do some tumbling. Press the jump button.
So yeah, this Tomb Raider on the Sega Saturn. As you can see, not terrible by any means, but definitely hasn't held up, I think, as well as the PS1 version. The game itself, hasn't held. I'd highly recommend the reboot Square Enix did just a couple years ago. At the time of this video, they're going to do Rise of the Tomb Raider, which I think is only going to be on Xbox One, which is unfortunate. But I have an Xbox One, so it doesn't matter to me a whole lot. It'll be fun to play it on Xbox, but it's just kind of weird that it seems to me PlayStation and Tomb Raider have had a pretty long history, and they're going to do that. So, but yeah, here's, like I said, just the Saturn. It's really weird with the 3 buttons, I guess. The other buttons obviously will probably be our shooters a little later. I can't even get up here. Yeah, it's a little rough. I don't know. I still prefer the PlayStation version better, but this is pretty cool. It's neat to play Tomb Raider on a different system. So there's the Saturn. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. Thank you for subscribing if you've done so. And we try to do videos every now and then. I guess I don't have a set schedule, but I always try to get at least one out every other week or so when I'm able to. So yeah, definitely leave a comment on your favorite Saturn games. I only have a handful of Saturn games. I'm really looking for some recommendations. So if you made it this far, first of all, thank you very much. I owe you a drink. And second of all, please leave, what's your favorite Saturn games? I'm looking to pick some up here in the near future. Got to expand the library a little bit. So, everyone, thanks for watching again. Take care. Happy gaming.